Okay, got me.
Yeah,
yeah. Just be a new link. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it did that to me, I think, yesterday or whatever. It's pretty new, but I guess it just gives you an opportunity to test it before you start, which I guess is a good idea.
Yeah, so that's cool. Okay, well, I'm on hotspot, so hopefully it'll last 45 minutes.
Yeah, well, I'll into it then. Okay, so the resolution that I provided was that Roy Moore does not deserve conservative support, defenses, or votes. Basically, conservatives should distance themselves from Roy Moore as much as possible. Now, obviously, when someone is considering voting for someone else, you obviously want to look at policy and what they align with. But there are a couple other things you have to look at before you're able to vote for someone or support them or try and defend them and in any way associate yourself with them. The first would be that of character, and the second would be that of the long-term effects. If you are associating yourself with someone whose character is so problematic that it is going to take your overall movement down, then that is a problem and you should not vote for that person, even if they agreed with you 100%. And if the long-term effects of supporting someone are going to damage your overall movement, you shouldn't support that person in the first place. So I'm going to look at both of those things as I talk about Roy Moore. So first of all, his character is disgusting and abusive. There have been at least 6 women who have gone on the record saying that when they were between the ages of 14 and 18, Roy Moore attempted to date them, provide alcohol to them, and in some cases even engaged in sexual activity with them. From the testimony of Beverly Young Nelson, she said, quote, "I trusted Mr. Moore because he was a district attorney. Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me, putting his hands on my breasts. I tried to open my car door to leave, but he reached over and locked it so I could not get out. I tried fighting him off while yelling at him to stop, but instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch. I continued to struggle. I was determined that I was not going to allow him to force me to have sex with him. I was terrified. He was also trying to pull my shirt off. I thought he was going to rape me. I was twisting and struggling and begging him to stop. I had tears running down my face. At some point, he gave up. He then looked at me and said, 'You are a child. I am the district attorney. If you tell anyone about this, no one will believe you.'" End quote. This mirrors the testimony of multiple other women who said that when they were underage, he tried to date them. In the case of Leah Korfman, he took off her clothes and tried to have her touch his genitals. It started off consensual with some of them, and then in other points went to more than that. But the point is, he was clearly engaging in activity with underage girls. He himself has even admitted that he has dated young women. He was banned from the Gadsden County Mall for repeatedly badgering young women. And he has also been caught lying. He said he did not know Beverly Young Nelson, the girl I just quoted, but he actually signed her yearbook in 1977 saying, quote, "To a sweeter, more beautiful girl, I could not say Merry Christmas. Love, Roy Moore, DA." Meanwhile, he and his wife also took an old letter of support from 53 pastors, and then they forged it to make it seem like those pastors supported him after the allegations. No,
I got you. Oh, yeah. you just need black, but yeah, I can still hear you.
I'll keep going. But they forged it to make it seem like they had supported him after the allegations had come out. But the letter had been written before. So multiple people who have named in this letter have demanded that they be removed from it. So ultimately, do we trust this man, or do we trust the allegations from the women who have brought forward actual proof that he engaged in illegal sexual activity with them when they were as young as 14? And the second point I had there was that of the long-term effects. So we've seen that his character is disgusting and abusive, but more than that, legitimizing assault will destroy the view of the GOP to others. Jonah Goldberg, the conservative intellectual and writer, said in October, even before the pedophilia allegations came out, talking about how even the guy himself isn't someone worth supporting. He says, quote, "Roy Moore is a twice disgraced former judge who believed 9/11 was divine retribution for our sins and an anti-Muslim bigot who can't quite bring himself to rule out the death penalty for homosexuals. The Republican nominee for Alabama Senate threatens to provide conservatism's critics with precisely the caricature they crave. Republicans should disavow, not embrace, Roy Moore," end quote. So this is even before we factor in the fact that he had engaged in sexual activity with minors. Just the man on his own is enough that he is a caricature. He's someone who makes the GOP look bad. There's no reason that conservatives should be supporting someone when the long-term effects of supporting him are going to make the conservative movement look bad, and they're going to make us look like we are supporting people who will engage in sexual activity with minors. He is a person who should not be voted for based on his own actions, and he should be voted against based on the long-term effects that come about when you vote for him. Voting for him would be selling the souls of conservatives, and it's simply not something that we should do.
Okay, quick question. When did this happen?
During the late 70s.
Oh, because you said is, quote, his character is disgusting and abusive, unquote. But I'm just a little confused. You make it sound as if you did it yesterday. So I don't know. Could you clarify that a little bit for me?
Yes.
Late 70s. So I don't know. You said is disgusting and abusive. So did he do this yesterday?
Is your contention that is only bad the day they do it, or are they bad the day after they do it? And in time.
Well, first of all, you're implying universal truth, which you don't believe in. But second, you said is disgusting and abusive because he did something 40 years ago. Now, let me point to my anybody watching. And how old are you, Daniel? Are you there? Uh-oh. Daniel dropped out. Did I drop out? Hopefully not. Seems to be okay. So, 25 years ago or so, Daniel was pooping his pants, suckling his own mother's breast. You there?
Yeah, I lost you for a few minutes, but my thing is back on. Can you go back to where you were a couple moments ago?
So I was saying that, again, you make it sound like you did it yesterday. You're saying he is disgusting, but you're talking about events from maybe 40 years ago. And how old are you, Daniel? You're 27?
25.
25. So I just want to point out 24 years ago, Daniel was pooping his pants, throwing tantrums, screaming, suckling his own mother's breast. Is that the kind of person you would vote for? Is that a disgusting individual? Daniel is a disgusting individual because he did that 25 years ago. Now, is that not repulsive? Oh, I mean, it just makes my skin crawl. So I think my point there is clear that what you did 25 years ago does not make you the same person today. We can look at the Democrats in a way that they look at people who commit murder or commit, various crimes from 40 years ago, and they say they paid their debts to society or whatever, and I agree with that. But Roy Moore, allegedly, now there's no evidence, you committed a couple of dishonest quotes there. Number one, the yearbook, there's no evidence that yearbook is true. They wouldn't even produce the yearbook. There was a picture of the yearbook, but they refused to produce the yearbook for analysis. You said, quote, forged letter, unquote. The letter was not forged. It was a real letter. It was recycled from 3 months ago, just before this whole thing blew up. The allegations, which, by the way, again, I would just say allegations are allegations. They're not evidence in and of themselves. And so he recycled it. It wasn't a forged letter. You could say it was a little dishonest that he reused them, and they weren't happy that they were reused, but it's not forged. Forged is to type up a letter and put their names on it. That didn't happen. Goldberg, that is the problem. That is why the GOP doesn't like Roy Moore, is because people, scumbags like Goldberg and the other big GOP control. Are you there? Dropped off again. So they don't like Roy Moore because they are the establishment and Roy Moore is the anti-establishment. And that's why they're trying to take over. That's why they don't want him there, because he's not a McConnell type GOP, which means it's just another word for a sellout. So I don't know if something else you did. Am I still on? The life is what you have to do. So somebody said charged with sex offender status. Now, yes, when you're charged, you're legally, it sticks to you. But let me point out that a lot of people who are charged with sex offenses actually marry the people that they, and have children and have long-standing lives of love and respect with the individual in which they're charged. There are many, many cases of that. And it's also an 18-year-old with a 17-year-old, 364-day individual. If the woman is younger and the man is older, then he will be charged with a sex crime. So to answer the question that was posted. Daniel, you're back.
Still I'm back. Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
So the last thing I heard was you were talking about the.
There he goes again.
Oh.
You said I was talking about something?
Yeah, you were talking about the forgery. You were talking about how it wasn't. He hadn't forged the letter.
It wasn't forged. It was recycled. It was an actual letter, actually signed by those ministers. He took it from, I think it was between 1 and 3 months ago, and he recycled it. So there was no forgery. You could say it was a little dishonest to say that they were endorsing him today when they'd actually endorsed him previously. But I don't know if they had officially withdrawn their endorsement. But again, it was not a forged letter. I think I did it. I did address the yearbook, correct? You heard that?
Yeah, that was unproduced. Yeah, keep going.
So they actually had Gloria Allred. I think it was Gloria Allred, Gloria Steinem, both of them. But Gloria Allred is the, once she gets involved, you know there's some fraud, something funky going on. So she allegedly has the yearbook, but refuses to produce it. So there's questions about the yearbook. There's no real evidence there. They won't produce it as evidence. Again, I mentioned Goldberg, which is GOP control. He's just one of the establishments. So when he says something about you, I think it's another sign of respect. I don't really think he has anything worthy of listening to, actually. So talk about destroying the GOP. People like Goldberg are destroying the GOP. That's why Trump got elected, is because they've gone and they've already destroyed the GOP. So I would just go back to character. These are things that allegedly might have, maybe, possibly, could have happened 40 years ago. So even if someone says, okay, this happened, I believe this happened 40 years ago, what has he done since? Now, by the way, he was a Democrat 40 years ago. He is a completely different individual. So he's not the same person. So I think that if you're voting for Roy Moore today, and you believe that he did it back then, you can still support him today because of what he has done since that alleged time. That he is a man of upstanding character today, potentially, at least.
Okay, so you started out by talking about how 24 years ago I was a child, I was a baby, I was pooping my pants. That has nothing to do with my character. That has nothing to do with my electability. That has to do with and it also is an entirely false analogy, because it has nothing to do with whether or not I have committed anything wrong. And it also has nothing to do with whether or not I am worthy of holding elected office. Just because when I was a child and I pooped my pants like a child, doesn't mean you would disqualify me from office. I get that it's a joke. I get that you're doing that, but it's also a false analogy, because we're talking about the character of someone who we're trying to hold up and question whether or not they are worthy of being held to elected office. One of the things that you must do when you examine whether or not you're going to vote for someone is examine their character. Because after all, if you wouldn't let them be around your children, why would you let them have power over you?
But you haven't mentioned anything about his character today. You mentioned things from 40 years ago that may have happened, and you don't have any evidence that they actually happened. You bring up the yearbook. I already said the yearbook is...
I'll talk about the evidence in a moment here. I'm talking about your point about 24 years ago. Now, let's talk about the fact that it happened a long time ago. If something happened a long time ago, does that mean the person gets off? Well, actually, in the comments, Henry has a really good point. He asks, are persons charged with sex offender status, are they charged for life, or does it disappear after a period of time? Well, it lasts life.
Does that matter? Does that matter? That doesn't apply.
Let me just go through the points here. Okay? So if you do something that hurts another person, that is something that belongs on your character, on your record, forever. If you murder someone, if you steal from someone, if you hurt someone, that will belong on your character forever. This is something that. All right, wait. Let me go through this, okay? If he did something wrong, it doesn't matter if it happened 40 years ago or if it happened yesterday. It means he hurt another human being, which means his character is in question, and we should not consider him for office. Now, let's talk about whether or not he did it. You said that there was no evidence and that the yearbook was unproduced. Well, if there is potential for a court case, it would go into the lawyer's holding, and the lawyer's going to hold on to it until the potential for that case. Whether or not there would be a case, unknown, because the statute of limitations is probably passed. But of course, she would hold on to that because she's the lawyer. More than that, you talked about how there was no evidence. Well, we actually have evidence. We have 6 different people who have all come forward saying this happened to them. None of them had any reason to lie. In fact, 2 of them were Trump supporters who had voted for Trump, including Leah Korfman and the person who I quoted to you, Beverly Young Nelson. Nelson, let me just go through this right now. Not only have they come forward, but they have also been corroborated by 33 other different people, including both girls' mothers, including ex-boyfriends who have said, yes, she told us about this back when it happened, including their friends. They've also found that Leah Korfman, for instance, Leah said that she met him at the court case because he was the DA, and that her mother had gone to that court because she was in court at the time. And then afterwards, Roy Moore met her outside on the bench, asked for her number, and eventually started dating her. He said he had never met her. This was proven false because they actually did find that the mother had met him and she had seen him going out with her. She had talked with her ex-boyfriend about how she had had this interaction with him. And the court records from the time do show that the mother was actually in that court at that time. There's no reason to believe him, and there's every reason to believe her. For you to say there's no evidence when there are 6 witnesses all saying this happened to them is ridiculous, especially considering the fact that there are 33 corroborating witnesses. There is overwhelming evidence to believe that this man has hurt human beings. Now let's talk about the Goldberg. Wait, just go through your points. You're talking about how you don't believe Jonah Goldberg, and how if Jonah Goldberg does it, that's because
well, it's not that I don't believe him. I just think he's an establishment Republican. I don't believe Michael Medved, anybody who writes for the National Standard, I think it was. Review,
you don't believe any of the conservative intellectuals.
But I don't believe them. I think they're full of shit.
You think that the conservative intellectuals are full of shit? Sure. Okay. But the points that he was bringing up were important ones. He talked about how Roy Moore has been fired from being a judge twice. He believes that 9/11 was divine retribution for our sins. And when he was asked if homosexuals should be given the death penalty, he was unable to come to an answer. He is a caricature who makes conservatives look terrible, and that's before we even factor in the fact that he has specifically hurt human beings. Multiple underage girls have come forward saying, this man used us sexually. Guess what? That is not a person who conservatives should support. He makes us look bad, and in more than that, he is someone
not worth defending. So don't say us. You're not a conservative.
I am a conservative libertarian. I kind of go back and forth on what exactly to do, but I certainly am more on the right than on the left.
Well, that's an issue for another time that I've already tried to discuss. I don't think you are. But that's one of the issues I actually have with you. Is you keep saying classical liberal. I don't think you know what it means. But that's an issue for another time.
Whatever. Show me why we should vote for this man.
So again, the reason that he was fired is a reason that conservatives can get behind him. He's a man who actually believes what he says, and he has principles, and he stands behind them. Now, he was sued by the ACLU, which is a ridiculous lawsuit. They apply the First Amendment, which applies to the federal government. He was a state judge, so it doesn't even apply there. Classical liberal, should know that. But so I think that right there is why conservatives can vote for him, can believe him. Second, we know that this is a political process. I would also point out that probably most of Congress has had some kind of, well, we can see it's coming out, right? So Conyers had sexual assault, whatever that means. Nobody really knows what that means anymore. I there's a woman who lives here. I grab her butt, daily. So she's my wife. So do I sexually assault her? I guess so. Right?
It's about consent, Nelson. It's about consent.
Okay, but a lot of the alleged events were consensual
with an underage person.
So what? You're talking about principle, or are you talking about legal?
Kind of both. First of all, not all of them were consensual. For instance, and Beverly Young Nelson both said that it was non-consensual, that they didn't have any say in it. And even if it was consensual, neither of them were legally able to consent at the time. So,
well, are you talking about legal or not? Because if you're going to talk about legal, then again, 40 years ago, that doesn't matter anymore, right?
I'm not saying that he should be sent to jail. I'm saying we shouldn't vote for him.
You're saying legal, though. But you're using legal, and you're also trying to say moral. But again, I would point out, universal standards, universal truths, which again, something that we've butted heads on that I don't think you actually believe in. I think you would admit you don't believe in universal truths.
Morality, yeah, I don't think.
But you're applying it in this case. But again, the point is, a main point here is it's 40 years ago. Now, have you ever stolen anything in your entire life? So you hurt somebody, so we can no longer trust you. I submit, Daniel admits he has hurt somebody, and according to his own standard, he cannot be trusted. He should not be listened to. Therefore, Daniel loses this debate, according to his own standards. Okay, so again, if you believe this happened, it's 40 years ago. He was a completely different person. He was actually in a completely different party. So, different person 40 years ago. Should conservatives support an individual who stood by his conservative principles? He's a guy he's kind of God and guns. You want to call him a caricature, but I think the conservatives, the Republican Party, if you want to say some of them are conservatives, most of them are not, but at least you want a conservative person in there. And I think this is why people would vote for him, is because he is what you would call a caricature, but he's someone who actually believes in conservative principles. Again, I'd say he is a different person than he was 40 years ago when this allegedly happened. But again, I would say this is a binary political process. So if you want to compare the person he's running against, he's someone that verbally abused and ridiculed a young child, female child, on the witness stand in one of his cases. So are we going to hold that against him? I wouldn't. He's part of his job. But again, if you're just going to say anything you do to hurt somebody, well, his opponent hurt young female children as well in a different way, but we have an actual court case where we know he actually did it. Half Congress did worse. I'd say.
Okay, so you first said that he was fired for doing what he believes. Well, he has been fired twice as a justice for the state court. The first time because he was not willing to accept the fact that the 10 Commandments were going to be taken down. I can understand a conservative defense of that, even though it technically isn't constitutional. He still was. You could try and say that it was. But the second time he was fired because
And that's a
fine.
Principle.
The second time that he was fired because after the Supreme Court said that the Constitution does recognize the right of homosexuals to be able to marry, he commanded the Alabama state judges to continue enforcing the state law against homosexual unions. So he was completely in violation of the Constitution and the accepted Supreme Court ruling, hence why he was fired. He is putting his own personal theocratic beliefs over the Constitution and over the law of the land that he was sworn to defend as a judge. He was not actually defending.
Ron, you're putting a very important conservative principle of states' rights, state law, over a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, which is exactly how it should be. That is a very strong. That's a classical liberal. You would also agree with that.
I will let you go. Just let me go through your points here, okay? So, as far as a classical liberal position, if the Constitution says something and if it has been interpreted in a certain way by the Supreme Court, I will defend the Constitution. And if you are elected as a judge, your job is to defend the Constitution. It is not to defend your personal theocratic positions. It is to defend the Constitution. Now,
he didn't defend his theocratic positions. He defended the state law. Was he a state or a federal judge?
He was a judge. Doesn't matter if he was a state or federal judge. If the Constitution says something, you don't get to, as a state judge, change from what the Constitution says. The Constitution is interpreted by the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court says this is what the Constitution means, this is what it means. Bingo. That's it. Now, you talked about... Nelson. Let me respond to your points, okay? Next, you talked about how theft is a reason why they should not be voted for, and you asked if I had stolen anything. Well, when you asked me that, the first thing that popped to mind was I was in a store and I stole a Baby Ruth one time. I didn't pay for it. I mean, literally, it was a candy bar. I'm sure I've stolen more, but the thing I was thinking of was a candy bar. So you're literally saying that I shouldn't be voted for because I stole a candy bar, and you're comparing that to a man who is sexually harassed and engage in illicit sexual activities with underage children. Sexual abuse of minors you are comparing to stealing a candy bar. This is ridiculous.
No, I'm just...
Argument, which does not make sense. Certain things are worse than others. One of them would be using your position as an elected official, as a district attorney, to then go and actually, district attorney isn't elected, but later on he became elected as a judge. But when he was a district attorney, using that position of power to be able to pick up underage girls and then engage in illicit sexual activities with them, which some of them are still hurt by today. One of the girls has talked about how she's had 3 different marriages and how she herself has been emotionally disturbed by it and how it's changed the way that she views sexuality. It's destroyed her life. There's a reason she's coming forward about it.
This is political. It's a political statement. It's a ridiculous political statement. But back to what
you talk about. You talk about how the person he's running against had verbally abused someone on the stand, which you are then comparing to Judge Moore sexually using underage girls, which you think is somehow in any universe comparable. They are not. One of them is doing your job in a way that might be a little over the top. The other one is using your position of power to get sexual with young girls. One of them is abusive and shows a clear problem in character. The other one is just doing your job a little too tough. Go ahead.
Again, I really have to pound this point. You keep saying his character is. These things allegedly happened 40 years ago. But I want to come back to, quote, I will not violate my oath, unquote. He told NPR in 2003. Quote, I cannot forsake my conscience. I will not neglect my duty. And I will never, never deny the God upon whom our laws and our country depend, unquote. So again, he was following a state law. It was actually later than that. It's the Supreme Court ruling. He was following the state law. He told other judges, follow the state law. That's exactly how it should be. And that's another great reason why conservatives would support him. He believes in states' rights, it would seem. He believes in following the state law, it would seem. He believes that state judges, and he also, another reason conservatives would vote because of what he believes today is, he points out correctly that separation of church and state never meant to separate God from government, Moore told NPR at the time. First Amendment never meant to divide our country from an acknowledgement of God. It's time to stand up and say, we have a right under our Constitution to acknowledge God. So that was regarding his 10 Commandments, which, again, are the basis for our law. These are reasons that conservatives should and can, at least can, support him today. So again, you look at his character today, his character over the last 35 years, if you believe he committed these acts 35, 40 years ago, you can still vote for him today because of the character he has shown over the last 35 years, and especially the character he shows today. And there are other issues that are important today as well. And his opponent is an anti-gun individual, openly, and Moore is pro-Second Amendment. So that's another reason conservatives can support and vote for Judge Moore today. And again, you act as if this happened yesterday. That's how you came out and you said he is a disgusting person, and then you talk about things that happened 4 years ago. Would I say Daniel is a disgusting, self-centered, whiny, complaining brat because of what you did 24 years ago? No, that's ridiculous. And that was my whole point. It is absurd to try to apply what you did as a child. You stole a baby Ruth. I think pretty much everybody in this world today has stolen something in the past, has committed some kind of moral violation, and many have committed, heinous acts in the past, and people will forgive them because they are a different person. They are a completely different character today than they were when they committed those acts. You could look at the son of Sam. Is he a person that, given his character today and what he's done in prison since then, is he still the son of Sam murderer? No. Are you familiar with him, David?
I think so.
David something.
Are you still going? Okay.
Go ahead, though.
First, I just want to address this whole thing about how it happened 40 years ago. Just because something happened a long time ago doesn't mean that we just let them go, especially when we're talking about public office. For instance, if someone had been a serial killer a long time ago, we don't just vote for them for public office. If someone killed someone, if someone hurt someone badly, we don't consider them for public office just because it happened a long time ago. That shows a character flaw, which is nothing. Let me go through. I waited for you. Now let me go through mine. It shows a character flaw which we cannot consider when we are voting for them for public office. Most importantly here, we're talking about sexual abuse of minors. This is an incredibly large claim, and it is one that has been backed up by a significant amount of evidence by multiple different people who say that he abused his position to hurt young girls. We're talking about kids here. This is not just minor, oh, he stole a candy bar. This is not him, oh, he verbally talked harsh to someone on the stand. This is someone who used his position to sexually abuse underage girls as young as 14 years old. That is a huge problem. This is not just your minor everyday consideration. This is huge. You also said that if it happened 40 years ago, we should forgive them. Sure, we can forgive them, but we don't elect them to public office. That's the whole thing here.
Actually,
bring this up in a moment here. Let me finish my points here, okay? You talk about how he was following a state law and how it was about separation of church and state. Well, even if he had good reasons for doing the one thing about the 10 Commandments, he still refused to engage in anything with regards to homosexuality. He believes homosexuality should be illegal, which is a dangerous position, and it's first of all illogical, and for another thing, it makes him look bad. This is the other thing. First of all, we're talking about his character, and then we're talking about what it does for conservatives. It makes conservatives look horrible, just like Todd Aiken's legitimate rape comments. This is worse than that. When he is defended, it makes it look like conservatives have no moral compass. Do conservatives have a moral compass? I hope so. I think so. But you can't say that they do when they support someone like this. Especially someone who has been denied from the state court twice, fired from his position as a judge, and someone who has been linked to illicit activities with a child. Let's also talk one more. This is from Business Insider talking about him as a caricature. They say, quote, Roy Moore has consistently cast doubt on former President Barack Obama's U.S. citizenship and promoted the birther conspiracy as recently as December 2016. The former judge said that homosexual conduct should be illegal. Moore has also acted on his virulently anti-gay beliefs. After he was reelected as Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, Moore was again removed from the position in 2016 after he directed judges to enforce the state's ban on same-sex marriages, despite the Supreme Court's decision to overturn it. Last February, Moore suggested that the 9/11 terror attacks were a punishment from God for Americans' declining religiosity. He later claimed that God may be angry with the U.S. because we legitimize sodomy. End quote. So what we see here is that Roy Moore is a caricature who no conservative should be taken seriously. He is a problem even on his own beliefs. And that's before we factor in the fact that this is a man who has significant character problems. And you want to talk about, oh, it happened 35 years ago. Whatever. If you sexually abused a child 35 years ago or yesterday, that's still a huge problem. And if
not the same thing. Number one, it's not the same thing. So that's my. Now, I would say that you brought up the Aiken comment of, quote, legitimate rape, unquote. I think that should be a caricature of the left, and they're too stupid to understand what he said, what that actually means. It doesn't mean a legitimate rape and an illegitimate rape. It means, were you raped or are you lying? That's what that means. So if you can't figure that out, so it was regarding abortion, by the way. Do you know what that comment was regarding?
I've never heard anyone try and defend that comment before.
Come on, can you possibly understand what he was referring to? I need an abortion. I was raped. Okay, give the abortion. Abortions are okay if you're raped, but we could outlaw them in all other ways. So I don't even want to get into that because it's really a ridiculous thing. I think he was under pressure and he sounded dumb, kind of ridiculous there, but that's not what he meant. So again, doing that, what he allegedly did 35 years ago, does not in any way apply to his character today. What you do a long time ago and you completely change and you are a completely different person today than you were back then means we should not apply the character of the individual 40 years ago to the character of the individual today. Again, I could go back to the Son of Sam murderer. He killed, I think, 5 or 7 young people, and he did so to honor Satan. And now he's a born-again Christian, and he is one of the best behaved prisoners in prison today. So do we look at this man, David something or other, and say that he is a mass murderer? He's an extremely violent, dangerous Satan worshiper? No, they would look at him today and they give him responsibilities in prison. So I think that's much worse than what Judge Moore allegedly did. But again, I would say even if we say that, yes, Judge Moore clearly did that, we can still vote for him today. Number one, given that he is not that kind of person today. He is a completely different person, has not behaved in that manner at all in 35 years. And 2, that given the binary choice, that he is the better character between the two, the person that you're voting for today. You're not voting for somebody who existed 35 years ago. You're voting for someone today. Are you going to vote for, I don't know if you're who's your favorite governor ever? Are people going to vote for Reagan today? No. He's not Reagan today. He's not the Reagan of 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So what was your other points?
I think I talked about how you were comparing things that were completely uncomparable. Like the the one guy, Jones, had verbally assaulted someone versus.
Yes, I think clearly I'm just pointing out that I'm not going to compare you today to you a long time ago and say, well, Daniel, he's probably not changed at all or something. Could I vote for Daniel? No, I'm not thinking of you as a little child. So, and as far as verbally attacking, I'm not necessarily comparing the two, but I'm just saying, if I use your standard of somebody who does something a long time ago, and am I still supposed to hold that person of 35 or 20 years ago, the person that would attack a child on the stand? And again, I don't even have an issue with that, but I don't think that I would ever hold that person. I would ever think of him, that kind of person, as being the person I'm looking at today. And again, I would say, you talk about a caricature of being Judge Roy Moore, but I would say that a lot of what he has done, the things he was fired for, are the kinds of things conservatives can really get behind and really should get behind. States' rights, right? Following state law, following the 10 Commandments. So this is not a First Amendment issue. The 10 Commandments is behind the Supreme Court, yet you can't have it behind a smaller court judge. It just shows the absurdity of the Supreme Court rulings. So I would say Judge Moore today, if you were looking at him today, he is he's kind of the Tea Party conservative, and that's the kind of person they want in the House today, is the person that he is today.
Okay. So because he's a Tea Party conservative, because he agrees with you on a lot of policy issues, you would vote for him. There is way more to a vote than just, do they agree with me? It's also about leadership. It's about what the person represents. It's about the person's character. And it's about what that vote is going to lead to long term. so much more than just, do I like what this person represents?
Okay, I've never said any of that. I've said all of those things are Judge Roy Moore that conservatives can get behind. He's a man of character today, and he's been a man of character for at least 35 years. And he is someone that, not just someone that I can agree with, but someone who stands behind these principles that I agree with.
So the other things,
there's a reason he beat his opponent in the primary, because his opponent was an establishment Republican. He's just a loser as far as they're concerned.
The other things that I've been talking about is how even if Roy Moore was a perfect person, he is a caricature who makes the GOP look bad. He has...
We don't want traditional mainstream establishment Republicans. That's the whole point. That's why they want Roy Moore in there, because he's not just some dumb elephant. He is a person who actually, who it would seem has principles today. It would seem that Judge Roy Moore has principles, and he showed that he has principles in the past, and that he's not just going to go along with the leadership and fold. And that's what they want. And that's, frankly, that's what I would like to see, is people that actually hold to their principles.
Okay.
People that will say things that the party doesn't agree with. And the idea that McConnell is going to kick him out of the House, when you've got people like Al Franken, Connors, who are some of the other people? You can't even keep track anymore.
Can I talk?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
So we were talking about a couple of things. First of all, we're talking about character. Whether or not the person has enough character. Character today. Gotcha.
Okay,
character today, as I have been talking about, he makes us look bad even today, because he has supported the birther conspiracy. He has said that homosexuality should be illegal, and he has been refused to even enforce what the Supreme Court had stated. He was a federal judge. He was elected to enforce the Constitution, to enforce that law. He refused to uphold his own job, which was why he was fired from his job. He has also talked about how 9/11 was a punishment by God for Americans' declining religiosity. He is a caricature of what the left thinks of when they make fun of conservatives. Even if he was the perfect person, we would not want to support that person for office. Now, let's talk about what he did. If you have hurt someone...
Okay, we've already gone over that. Let me ask you a really quick question.
So long.
Age of consent. I want to talk about... Well, yes, we've gone over that, but I want to know why you think it's wrong to date someone under 18.
It is wrong legally to date someone who is under the age of 18. It is also wrong.
It's not.
It is also wrong morally to use your position as an adult to pressure or entice a young person into sexual acts. The man, 32 years old.
Why?
He was taking advantage of a 14-year-old girl who had never had sex before. He was able to get her into his room. He got her clothes off. He took them off himself. He made her touch his penis. The other girl who has talked about it said that she was in the car with him when he groped her without her consent, and she had to try to escape from the car. I don't care if you're talking about how this happened a long time ago. This shows a person who did not care about didn't have enough respect for a person, for a girl, and let alone not just a girl, but an underage girl, someone who doesn't know enough for herself. This considerably puts in a negative light his character. And that's even before we factor in the fact that he makes the GOP look bad. Let's just talk about this from the perspective of the left. The left hears, oh, this is a person who has sexually abused minors. Wow, what a terrible group of people the GOP must be. And that's without even considering all the other things that he has done. This is not a person who conservatives should get behind. It makes conservatives look bad, and it sells the conservative soul. When the conservatives want to claim, we are the party of morals, how can you say that when you are supporting someone who there is evidence, multiple different accusers who have all come forward saying the same thing, saying when they were underage, he engaged in sexual activity with them? I'll let you have the final word.
So I think Michael has posted some things on this. There was only one person. Some of them were dating. So we're talking with parental permission. Nothing improper happened. I'm still confused on why 18, why you think 18 is the moral legal age, but it's a purely subjective standard.